Welcome, heathens and witches, to the Horn
and Cauldron
podcast. There we go. Yeah, that's what we're doing. So we're back at it again for another episode of the podcast, guys. It's just about Beltane season. So we're going to be bringing you another Beltane episode, Beltane 103 Fairy Circles, which is very exciting. I do not know what this is about. I mean, I understand that I just said fairy circles, so I imagine round things, what with to do with the fae, but I'm gonna learn along with you. Before we get into it, though, if you're on YouTube, don't forget to like this video, comment below, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and do all that kind of stuff. And if you are on your podcast network of choice, leave us a review. That's how we know that you listened. And also, you can, obviously hit us up on social and all that kind of stuff. It's all be linked in wherever links are for the thing that you're doing. And, did I introduce us?
You sure did.
Yeah, we're us. So there you go.
At least I think you did.
I don't know. We're us. Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it at the end. So yeah, let's just get right into it. What's going on with fairy circles, y'all?
Well, first, let's talk about Beltane. Okay. So Beltane is held in the northern hemisphere on May 1st, although some people celebrate the night before. And in the southern hemisphere, it is celebrated on November 1st. Again, sometimes the night before.
Yeah.
And Beltane is about halfway between the Spring Equinox and the Summer Solstice. This festival has been historically popular with herding communities and was traditionally the time that livestock was taken out into the fields after winter and the birthing season. And Beltane is usually celebrated with bonfires and visiting holy wells, fertility rituals.
Sure is. Would this be the last of the Spring 3?
Yes, this is the last of the Spring 3.
This is the last of the Spring 3.
Handfasting, honoring the fae, maypoles is like the big thing. Mm-hmm. Feasts, of course, decorating with spring greenery, flowers, and ribbons. And some people celebrate Beltane under the names Walpurgisnacht, May Day, Blossomfriols, or Floralia. There are slight differences between them, but that is basically it. And we talk more about general Beltane info and ways to celebrate in Beltane 101. That's episode 11. And we talk a little bit more specifically about the differences between and the ways to celebrate specifically Walpurgisnacht, May Day, and Floralia in Beltane 102, which is episode 37.
Yeah, and those if you are watching this on YouTube, obviously we have podcast playlist or whatever, but we also have this signed on as a podcast on YouTube. I know that YouTube now has some sort of podcast feature. I don't know how it works, but I checked the box, so it's there. So
we hope that helps you.
Yeah, you should be able to look those up. You should be able to look those up pretty easily, and hopefully that new podcast feature on YouTube works.
Yeah,
somehow. So
yeah, I don't know.
I haven't used it to listen to a podcast. I listen to it on all of the other places that you listen to podcasts. So I don't. Why would I listen to it on YouTube?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Maybe it's just so that you can see our beautiful smiling.
Well, but that's the whole video. So, it defeats the podcast definition of the word podcast. But we'll see what happens, man. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that is what Beltane is and was.
Yeah.
And, all of its connective tissue here. I guess we'll get right into fairy circles now, right?
Yeah. So the reason that we're talking about fairies, and we tend to talk about the fae in the spring right around Beltane time, because this is the time of the thinning veil. And I know that sounds weird to some people, because you always hear about that in the Halloween-y times, how the veil is thin and blah blah blah. But the thing is the veil is thin at Beltane and at Halloween, at Samhain. So you'll see a lot of otherworldly and trickster things associated with
spring shenanigans.
With spring. So that is one of the reasons we talk about the fae. They're sort of waking up from hibernation and starting to be how they are.
Be doing stuff. Done be doing
be doing stuff. Yeah. So fairy circles. Fairy circles, those little circles of grass, with mushrooms or whatever.
Or a circle of mushrooms.
So fairy circles are also called fairy rings, pixie rings, witches circles, sorcerers rings, elf circles, and elf rings, depending on kind of where you are
If there's only one of them, it's a one ring. But that might spawn a volcano, so be careful.
That's fun. Yeah. We don't want that. Or maybe we do.
Or maybe we do.
Does it mean that I don't have to go into work tomorrow?
Or maybe
then
we
yes.
do.
So in Germany, there's actually a superstition that witches would gather and hold their Walpurgisnacht celebrations in fairy circles. How fun.
And it's fun. Those are very small witches or a very big circle, because fairy circles generally aren't that huge.
That is how we ended up in this rabbit hole.
Or it's like a very tiny, like, not particularly gangster party. It's just like three people standing real close together, just like, pff, rad Beltane, right, guys? Hands inside the circle, watch out. So, magical.
Yeah.
You know, so that's weird. I just imagine some farmer, like, going into the woods to, like, chase after, like, a runaway animal or something, and he sees that, and he's like, y'all doing all right over there? And they're just like, oh, yeah, don't worry about us. We're doing, mysterious stuff. Don't worry about it, man. And he's just like, these fucking witches are getting weirder and weirder by the season. That's a real tiny circle. There are, like, 4 witches in there, I think, so I don't know about that. Nobody's gonna believe me when I get back home and tell them this story.
Oh, it's like the TARDIS. It's as big as it needs to be.
Yeah.
It's bigger on the inside.
It's just like, how many hats did you see in that circle? And he's like, I counted 4, but I gotta tell you, the circle was like this big, so I don't know. Yeah. Maybe someone was wearing a 2-point hat. Do they have those 2-point hats? And that's how we got 2.0 as a saying. There you go.
No, that's
making up
not
lies.
At
Making up
all
lies.
How that works. Jeez. Okay, so fairy rings. They're naturally occurring rings of mushrooms or other plant life. They're found mostly in forest and grassy areas. And fairy rings usually manifest in a couple of different ways. There's dead grass in like a ring shape, a ring of healthy grass in an area of less healthy grass, a circle of dead grass inside an area of healthy grass, and a ring of mushrooms, which can also be in combination with any of the other kind of bits here. And also, the rings are not always perfect rings. Sometimes they're more like arcs, like sections of a ring, and sometimes you can have multiples in a row. There's actually some really cool pictures of fairy rings in Iceland that are like in the moss, where they're kind of like a whole bunch of like segments of a ring together. It's very cool.
Yeah.
So before we talk about the magical side of things, I want to talk a little bit about the science behind it, because it's actually super fascinating. And this is kind of one of those interesting things where you're like, okay, well, like, maybe there is some magic blending into this science, because really the thing is like, we know why fairy rings occur, but also we don't literally at all.
A lot of science is that we, like, know a thing, but we don't really get why that's a thing. It's like, we can explain how this is happening, but why this occurs in the manner in which it occurs, that's a different thing entirely.
Yeah.
You know?
So fairy rings form when a mycelial network expands outwards in a circle over time. A mycelial network is the, like,
little
network
white underground hairs.
of hairs and kind of like roots of mushrooms underground. Mushrooms grow along the outermost edge of the circle because they're sort of like leading the path forward for the ring to expand. And the grass in the center of the circle will most often be dead. These fairy rings can grow to be as big as like 33 feet in diameter, but left unchecked over hundreds of years, they could grow as large as the Belfort ring in France, which is about 1,000 feet wide and is over 700 years old as of 2017.
That's awesome.
That means it is so wide that it can fit the Eiffel Tower lying on its side.
Nice.
Or 1/3 of Sauron's tower.
Yeah, Sauron's tower being 3 Eiffel Towers.
And an important
unit of measure. Yeah.
Unit. Yeah. Now the Namibian desert also has fairy circles, but they don't have any mushrooms in these circles. And scientists aren't sure why these rings occur. The current theory is that the rings are formed when the grasses inside the circle no longer have enough water to survive. And the plants on the outer edge of the circle might be stealing water from those in the middle. They also think that maybe it has something to do with termites or other bugs, but they're not sure. Yeah. And these fairy circles can grow up to 65 feet wide, and they're like pretty numerous in these deserts.
Yeah.
And then there's also fairy circles in the Australian desert, which are made by termites.
Yep.
And scientists sort of believe this, but the thing
Termites,
about,
they might be make-believe.
no, it's not that the termites might be make-believe, but the thing is the scientists are basing off of this dead grass stealing water and this mushroom mycelial network theory, and they're like, but neither of these things are really happening in this Australian desert. And the native peoples were like, according to the stories and legends from our ancestors, it's termites. And the scientists are like, no. No. And they're like, yes. Yeah. So this is kind of an interesting thing when you think about the science and the magic of it.
Sure.
So just sort of keep that in mind. And then lastly, there are fairy rings that grow in redwood forests. When we happen to live in a redwood forest. They typically grow around large old trees. The tree's root network sometimes sprouts small shoots up and they turn into trees from the parent tree. And they all share the same root network. And sometimes the parent tree dies and the child trees remain, but this isn't always the case. Yeah. We actually have several fairy rings of redwood trees on our property.
Yeah. We have one that we we call it like the chapel, because it's just this like perfect arch like into the side of a mountain, and it's just like an arch of trees.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So yeah, totally.
They're also, we have several of them in an area that we know to be an area that is more active by the Fae as well.
Sure, totally.
So that's sort of a piece there. We don't have like fairy circles of like mushrooms or anything in there, although we do.
We
get
have
a
mushrooms
ton of
everywhere, but yeah,
but they're not
circling.
Like
they're just everywhere. So circles within circles, one could say. Yeah,
no, a circle of one.
Definitely with the termites, that like totally makes sense. So termites are one of these like fun creatures that the way that they like hive mind is really, really interesting. Scientists do a lot of study on it. I've seen several documentaries on it about how like if they put like a termite in a pen and like a cage or whatever with like a pile of sand, it will just move all of the little grains from one side to the other, and then once it's done moving them, it'll just start moving them back to the other side for like no apparent reason. It'll just do this endlessly. That it just works, right? And like it eats and drinks and sleeps and does bug stuff, but like that's its task.
Yeah.
But when you get 2 of them in there, it like speeds up. When you get like 3 in there, they start stacking to try and form like a shape of some sort, but it never really works out. And like as you increase the numbers, there's a certain number, and it's been a while since I've seen these documentaries, but let's say it's like 7 termites. At 7 termites, now every time they build a pile, they'll build the pile in the shape of an arch. They'll build like a little arch and then a little arch next to it until they run out of stones, and then the rest are just piles around it, right? And then they'll take those apart and move them over here, and take those apart and move them over here. And as you build up the numbers, the like complexity of the structure they build increases, which kind of leads you to believe that like, okay, so if like the legend, the traditional tales that they're built by termites, well, it would make sense if like, let's say during some sort of great movement in termite communities, like some number of termites are left behind, those termites would essentially just build circles.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what to do. So they're just like trying to build the outside wall, and they build it up, and then they're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. So they'll just go to another place and then build it up, and that doesn't make any sense. So like, because there's not like enough termites to like support the like complicated structural engineering that's happening. Yeah. Like through shared consciousness or whatever the heck.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Termites are very interesting bugs. The way that they like handle stuff, especially like earth moving termites, things like that, like dirt termites, very interesting bugs.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the fairy circles that's interesting is fairy circles sort of happen like everywhere.
Oh,
like
totally.
When you think about fairy circles, you really kind of think of them in sort of like this Victorian art sense, right?
Well, you certainly think of a fairy circle as like specifically
in Western
white mushrooms,
Europe and mushrooms in a circle,
in like an English forest.
Yeah. But they happen basically everywhere in the world.
Oh, totally.
And we don't know why
rings. They just
happen everywhere, but we know why they happen in some places, but we still don't entirely understand like why. But the thing about it is all throughout the world there are stories of native peoples believing that the fairy rings have special power.
Sure,
and
totally.
also are typically inhabited or frequented by the fae folk of the area. We talk a little bit more about types of fae folk around the world in a different episode. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit later on. But like these stories are for like everywhere, but the reasons scientifically for the fairy circles, we don't know
the
why.
occurrence of the circles are very different because the medium of the circles is very different.
Yeah.
Depending on the region, it's just that nature seems to produce a bunch of circles.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
kind of all over or whatever.
Yeah, and there are, of course, a variety of different, like, local beliefs about fairy circles. So, like, some people in Scotland believe that fairies would use the mushrooms as tables or seats for their little parties.
Party mushrooms. I heard about those.
Yeah, party time mushrooms. I mean, it seems like a lot easier than renting a whole bunch of, like, tiny tables.
Yeah, you gotta go to a pizza place, you gotta borrow a bunch of tiny picnic tables. So, I don't know,
Yeah.
that seems like a bunch of work. You gotta wait for pizzas to be invented for that shit to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
what were you gonna eat on before pizza tables? Think about it.
candlesticks?
No, wax
That
is too
doesn't make
expensive
sense.
for that shit, man.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, your food's just gonna
I got
stick to the
nothing.
candle table.
I got nothing.
Yeah.
Saucers, I guess.
Yeah, abandoned pieces of saucers.
Abandoned saucers, yeah. Not to be confused with flying ones.
That would be a very significantly more terrifying fairy ring. Like, listen, I'm walking through the woods. I see a circle of mushrooms. I'm gonna be like, all right, don't go near that fucking circle, responsible adult style.
Yeah.
But if I walk out into the woods and I see a circle of decorative floral teacup saucers in a circle, I am never going into those woods again. I'm leaving. Moving to the big city, guys. Dude, big city stuff. Brutal architecture. Concrete jungle. Yeah. Immediately abandoned nature. That's horrifying. So, yeah, don't do that.
Yeah. So, elsewhere in Wales, some people believe that fairies pick the mushrooms and use them as parasols or umbrellas.
Yep.
They also, some people also believe that there are cities of fairies underneath the rings. And as the ring expands, so does the Fae City.
Sure.
Which is like a fun little thing to think about there.
That's essentially the plot of Super Mario Bros. Movie from the 80s.
Yeah, basically.
Was that the city was mushrooms.
Yeah,
or
basically.
something.
So that's it.
Yeah.
Super Mario Bros.
They
City.
knew Fairy City, yeah.
Yeah, they knew all about it.
Yeah.
In Austria, some people believe that fairy circles are actually not caused by fae, but by a dragon blighting the land, causing only mushrooms to grow in that spot for 7 years.
Ah.
And
Circle dragons. Yes.
And in some areas of the Netherlands, they believed that the devil would put his milk churn there, and that's why it was
His milk churn?
his milk churn.
To make butter?
That's what it said. His milk churn. Yes. I'm assuming to make butter.
And is it because when you're churning milk, I'm not gonna do that as an example. The splashing is gonna occur in a circular ring-like shape from
I don't
because
know.
because the devil lost maybe the lid to his milk churn. This is honestly presenting more questions than answers. If somebody has a picture of the devil's milk churn, maybe he uses a different shaped churn. Please let me know about that.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Also, what do you think I mean, we know what the devil's lettuce is, but what would the devil's milk be? Would that be opium?
Yeah.
And if so, do you make butter out of that? Can you make butter out of
You
that?
definitely
Probably
can't make
not.
butter out of opium. That's definitely not how that works. No, because that's not the same milk.
Well, then he's just churning milk for no reason, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, maybe... I don't know. Maybe he just likes butter on his toast or something. Right?
I get it.
Maybe he's like, everybody's gonna tan there, so no sunscreen, just butter.
Just butter.
Yeah.
Gross.
Everything's just gonna smell like sizzling meat or something. I don't know.
I mean, that sounds fantastic.
Right? I'm just saying. Maybe he's just like, we don't want it to smell bad down here, so like butter and potpourri.
Everything barbecue.
Yeah.
So, depending on where you are, what happens when you enter the rings also varies. So, like in France, some people believe...
The answer is always very simple, though. It's don't.
Well, I mean, but also maybe, yes.
But also maybe do.
So in France, some people believe that the rings were made by huge toads that would curse anyone who stepped into it. And also that maybe they were made by the fairies, but the toads were just protecting them. Like huge toads.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
A variety of other stories and superstitions also say that you could die or become invisible, unable to escape, you might lose an eye, or be transported to the fairy realm.
Yeah, okay. Those are all very different things. Die when you walk in the circle. Is it like silent instant death? Because that's horrifying.
Oh, no.
Or is it like you walk into the circle and you're like, everything seems fine, and then just like, doom.
It's a little bit of both.
Become invisible feels like not a curse at all.
Well,
right? It's
not
like, hey, nobody can see me now that I stepped in this fairy ring. Life a crime.
But then nobody could see you ever, and you'd have to live your life
alone. It doesn't like wear off or nothing?
No.
If somebody else turns invisible, are they visible to you because they're in the plane of invisible, where invisible people are? Also, by turn invisible, do they just mean ghost up, bro?
I guess.
Which might just be die. They're like, this guy turned invisible. And you're like, I mean, I can see his fucking corpse right there, but okay, maybe. So that's, okay, sure. Unable to escape, that's just like, it's just a trap in Dungeons and Dragons. You're like, what's this ring on the ground here? And then you step in it, and they're like, bars shoot up out of the ground or whatever. Like, we've seen 80s movies. That seems like a weirdly unnecessary way to trap people. Lose an eye is far too specific. Did somebody just poke you in the eye? When you walk into the circle, some guy just walks up and is like, we said no. Just gets you with like a nail or something, and then like a twig. He's like, bah! And then just fades back into the bushes. And you're like, shit. Yeah. Why would somebody do that? And they're like, don't go in the rings, man. There were signs and shit. You should have read them. And obviously transported to the fairy realm. That's just quicksand, dog.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you're just done. And of course, one of the more popular beliefs is that if you stepped in the ring, you'd be cursed to dance in circles around the fairy ring until you died from exhaustion. Although this exhaustion doesn't necessarily happen while you're in the fairy ring.
Sure. You just die because you had to like dance the night away.
Yeah.
Sure. Sure. I mean, that doesn't seem too bad. Is there music? Who's DJing the fairy ring curse?
I don't know. I imagine that would also be like a regional thing.
It's probably dubstep or something, right?
Oh, maybe. They were like dropping the bass
or like
hundreds of years ago.
Yeah. It's like club music. Like walk in and the club music just takes you and you start dancing around in a circle.
This is my jam.
Yeah, right? Your friend's like, stop,
you're
please.
Like, is that... You're like walking in the woods.
We're trying to save you.
Is that 50 Cent?
Yeah. Dum. You're just like, I know this song.
You're like, I know this song. I love this song.
Yeah.
And then that's
and
it.
And then the circle just takes you. I mean, that shit happens, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes the music takes you.
Sometimes you have to rock and roll.
Like it was once said, music make you lose control. So, that's Mary J. Blige, I think, maybe?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to go with, like, Kiss.
Oh, sure.
Like, you gotta party every night.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, or you gotta rock and roll all night and party every day.
You know what?
You know what? Thinking about it, that's a very Fae inspired
Somebody's got to be
song.
the cat. It's fine, guys.
Yeah, somebody does have to be the cat. It's not me. So, a lot of the more popular stories are negative, but there's also positive superstitions about fairy circles too. So, in some areas, like particularly in Wales, they believe that if the sheep eat the grass from a fairy circle, or if crops are grown near one, then they will flourish. And in other areas, building a house or a building on or near one could bring good fortune.
Sure, yeah. Sure, definitely.
Yeah.
I like that build a house just over the top of a fairy circle. That's very like, oh, what's going on in your basement? And you like go down into a stone cellar and there's just a dirt floor with a ring of white mushrooms in the bottom of it. That is.
I mean, that's like
a whole nightmare.
That's like
and I love
kind
that.
of literally our basement.
Yeah, I know. I love it. I'm here for it.
Yeah. Our house was like built on top of this like old tree, but like we like there are child trees in areas around. So we do kind of live inside of a fairy circle.
Oh, totally. Totally. Yeah.
In an area that's like particularly active with the fairies. So yeah, that's that's definitely a
different
thing.
kind of circles. Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of depends on how you look at it. And the thing about working with the Fae, and this is our like third episode specifically dedicated to the Fae, is that like there's really most of the people out there are like talking about the Fae, and they're saying like negative things, like, and that's kind of like what the historical superstition is. Like, don't talk to the Fae. The Fae are bad. They will do bad things to you. But the thing about it is that's kind of not how it works. Not even kind of. That's not how it works.
Well, this is let's think about this from a perfectly rational standpoint here. There's always some assholes in any group, and it's obviously going to be situational. Like if you're doing a thing and you're getting like bad vibes, bro, about that fairy circle, well then, I mean, don't go near it. It's giving you bad vibes. Don't touch shit that gives you bad vibes. That's like mad straightforward, right? But like if you're like everything seems cool or whatever, then like everything probably seems cool or whatever, right? Like just be smart about it, and don't be like doing silly stuff. Well,
it's not even just really doing like silly stuff. It's kind of like working with the Fae in a way that makes sense, right? Yeah. So like they're not like a vessel to be at your beck and call. So like if you want to use fairy circles,
literally like working with any other animal. Like if sometimes people are assholes, but then also like if you're being like, like a shitty person about it, and like taking advantage of the situation or whatever, then like in general nature is going to be like, fuck you, buddy.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, the thing about
just think about it. It's a pretty straightforward kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is the key to working with the Fae, and also like by extension fairy circles, is this thing that people have been like really talking about a lot since like the fall of last year, and that's working your wage. The Fae are like low-key quiet quitters. No, not really. But they are very much in tune to this idea of equal pay for equal work. So in this case, the pay is the offerings that you are giving to them, and the work is the thing that you are asking them to do, whether through a spell or a request or wish, however you want that.
Yeah, whatever your particular
So like offering too little to them for a task is offensive. Like, you want me to do all this work for a measly bite of bread? Yeah. That's like that's like offensive. Yeah. But also offering too much would put them in your debt, which is a position they are also not fond of. Yeah. You may get too much oomph out of a spell this way also, which is not always a good thing. So really the key to it is sort of giving an equal offering to an equal task. And this can be a difficult thing to sort of like think about, like, okay, well, what is an equal offering to an equal task? So if you were like, help me find my lost object, that's kind of a small thing, like that's a small thing for them to do. So that's a smaller offering, as opposed to help me quit my job for a better job. Like that's a larger ask. There's a lot more work associated with that kind of thing. So you would want to be leaving larger and also probably more frequent offerings for something like that. Yeah. So the idea behind it is if you're leaving something small, you will get something small in return. If you're leaving something larger, then you will receive something larger in return. But really the thing about working with the Fae is not just leaving offerings and getting an equal pay for equal work, but also you don't always have to ask for something from them. And this is
you can just have friends. All of your friends don't need to be some sort of weird asset in your portfolio of like human relationship, like a monster. Yeah. So like you could just like be friendly about that shit, right? It's like bees. You can just like be cool with bees, or you can like over fucking react and be aggressive with bees. Just let bees do bee shit. They have important tasks that they got to take care of. Let them do their thing, bro.
Yeah, they got bee business to do.
Yeah, they got bee shit to do.
Yeah.
Leave the bees alone, guys.
Yeah,
Help them if you can, honestly.
It's best to sometimes just leave an offering for the Fae because you want to. This kind of doesn't really put them in debt in the same way as leaving a large offering for a small task, because you're just sort of like, hey, thought you'd like this.
Yeah.
And that's a nice thing to do. This
Thanks
helps
for being
to build
cool, dog.
rapport.
Here you go.
Yeah, it helps to build rapport with them, to establish a friendship. It helps for future spell work because you're sort of building that foundation, because they know that you're good. You'll pay them back. You have to think of it as a reciprocal friendship where you're, putting in and getting out, you're getting out what it is that you're putting in, and vice versa.
Sure. Totally. Yeah. I think that often people look at the trickster thing in a sort of only negative tricks. Ha. But it's not all only negative stuff. It's situational. I think that the way we talk about the Fae is one of those context and nuance is lost on the internet, because in a 30-second soundbite it's kind of difficult to fully illuminate that the complex nature of the relationship that people can and cannot have with Fae, relative to a bunch of shit. So obviously we're gonna kind of default to the well, they're tricksters, so they're gonna do tricky shit, and that's hard to navigate, so don't do that shit. Right? But if you're willing to put in the effort and the work, then you can form a good relationship. I mean, honestly, this is the exact same thing with raising a garden, right? If you just want to buy a contraption and that you put in your kitchen that makes plants go, that's fine, but you're not going to get the full experience. And you're not really going to have much of a relationship with your food, which is already a thing that is lost on modern people these days, is that we don't have any real relationship with our food. So we don't really have any connection with the nature around us and the nature of our food and what goes into it, and how so many factors contribute to those things. Because when you want lettuce, you go to the store and it just exists. You're not aware of the how oh, this has been a really warm and dry summer, so lettuce is gonna be less good this year, because you're not growing your own plants and you're not doing those things. So it's the difference, and if you've ever had a garden, you know this, where it's oh, a tomato at the store, it's good tomato, even if you're buying heirloom tomatoes, good tomato, but the tomato you grew in your garden is always better tomato.
Yeah.
Right? And it's because you put in the effort and you put in the work, and I think that it's the same thing with the Fae, is it's part of that the natural connection between if you put in work, you get stuff out of it, and that stuff is knowledge and understanding and quality, and all of that, all of those things together, which result in you having that better relationship you're talking about, I don't really think of the Fae as being transactional, insofar as I have no need to ask the Fae for a thing. They just seem like dope people, so just let them do dope people shit. Again, bees, just they seem cool, just let bees do cool shit, right?
Yeah.
That's 100% my interaction with bees. Mm-hmm. So, and that's the same way that I do that with the Fae and such.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do that a lot too. I leave them lots of offerings. I try to meditate and speak to them, to work with them, to better understand them, to help other people better understand them, which in its own way is sort of a devotional act for me to the Fae, is to have less people be scared of them and scared of working with them. But I do also ask the Fae for help sometimes, but oftentimes I find that they are mostly gifting me things. It makes things easier, it greases the wheels,
finding
so to speak.
Stuff that you lost. How many times have I found a piece of jewelry that you've lost, in the most random ass place possible?
It happens.
Yeah. Sometimes a place that it makes no sense for that jewelry to be in that place.
But not just jewelry. oftentimes many things.
Oh, just
like
weird stuff. Just weird stuff.
We have lots of different things that have been returned to us by the Fae, or we have found, like, one of the things that I've found that since we have been working with the Fae is, they are mischievous. Don't get that twisted. They will do mischievous, trickstery type of things, but when they do, it's generally, fairly harmless. And I've always felt that when we find the thing that we have been looking for, your lost keys or, something like that, you like kind of hear them giggle when they're giving it back to you, like, ha 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 ha, like, how funny that was for us to take it from you. You have to kind of imagine them in a different mindset as, like, standard humans are, really. And just thinking about it that way definitely helps, because you have to try to understand that they are not like us. They're not humans. They don't think of things in the same way as humans do. So you have to kind of, like, keep that in mind when you're trying to figure them out. So, like, with all of that in mind, you can use fairy circles to your advantage in a very simple way, which is this. So leave an offering near one. Best offerings really are like honey, bread, candy, soda, wine, or alcohol, flowers, shiny objects of some value. Also, if you're leaving food or drink out there, just make sure that you're not leaving something that's going to hurt the wildlife. Yeah. That's no good. That's no bueno. And please try not to leave plastic out there. Yeah. And then once you've left the offering, if you have like a wish or a spell that you want to do, make it known when you leave the offering what it is that you want, and the Fae will fulfill the wish to the level of the offering made. More complicated or larger asks, being more work, you'd of course want to pay them correspondingly. And also keeping in mind where you're leaving this stuff outside, Yeah. Don't leave like a whole rotisserie chicken in a park. That's just weird.
Yeah, well, that's how you get raccoons and other sundry animals.
Yeah.
Right? So again, that's part of that, like pay attention to what you're leaving behind with regard to, like, where and what it is. Make sure that it's not going to have some sort of deleterious effect on the wildlife around here. And also, like, that offering can be both like a one-time payment, or several reoccurring payments in the form of installments. I mean, we all know what infomercials have taught us. So, like, that's the thing. Yeah. If it's a place that you always hike, you could do a thing that's reoccurring every time you hike there. Or, like, if it's on your property, then just change that shit out, like, every day. You live there. It's fine.
Yeah. And you can just throw that stuff away when it's done, too.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything fancy.
And if you live in a place where, like, the animals are already a bit of a noose, you can, like, leave that out there and then bring that shit in before nightfall.
Yeah.
You know? So you don't have, like, varmints doing varm and such.
Yeah, you don't need bugs and mice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't have a specific ask, just leave the offering there for them. You'll often find later on that you've been gifted something small in return, a feather or like a small object. Sometimes a lost item will be returned to you. Sometimes an entirely new thing will be given to you. Yeah. One time you were gifted a sack of concrete, but like, when you like leave concrete outside and it rains and it hardens, it turns into like a
surprise block of concrete.
Yeah, you got a surprise block of concrete.
That's happened. Yeah, we had the sheep.
Yeah, we have a sheep.
We have like a little sheep statue that just
appeared one day.
We have had a myriad of weird finds on our property. Yeah. Over time, and sometimes it's like something Julie misplaced a while ago that I had no clue about, and I'm just like, oh, this is outside. What is this doing outside? This is an outside thing. And then bring it in, and I'm like, why is this outside? And Julie's like, I've been looking for this. And I'm just like, yeah, well, it was just out there, so.
Yeah.
Or outside just do that sometimes.
Recently we had one of our dogs pass away. She was older, and it was, kind of coming, and we were digging up a spot on the property to bury her and had like a pile of dirt. And in this pile of dirt, when we were starting to fill the hole back in, we found that there was like a lid to a pot.
Like a lid to a pot, yeah.
That was not there before.
Yeah. Yeah, like not in the pile of dirt when I dug it up, because I was having to I broke a shovel. So I had to use a trenching shovel, which is narrow. So that lid would have not fit on the shovel, yet there it was. So that was fun. Weird things that happen in the woods.
Yeah, all kinds of other weird things.
Stuff.
Those are just a few of the like top of our head ones too.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of different ways that you can work with the Fae there, and we talk more about working with the Fae in episode 9, which is literally called Working with the Fae, and it's kind of like the intro to the Fae stuff. Yeah. And then also episode 39, which is Types of Fae.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also, for those who may be interested, I am working on a sort of like a class for how specifically to incorporate working with the Fae into your practice. That's something that probably isn't going to be happening for like a little while, but like teasers for our like 10 listeners of like future things to come is like classes and kind of like lectures beyond the podcast side of things.
Yeah.
More informational.
More like specialized lectures that sort of delve a little bit deeper. We don't have all the deets really figured out on that yet.
Yeah, but we have that planned.
Yeah.
So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So, like, I guess really the thing is like, okay, so what do we do specifically with regard to fairy circles, right? So this is like this is all about Beltane, and this is all about fairy circles. So, like, let's ask ourselves, what do we do for Beltane, and what do we do with regard to the Fae and fairy circles, but more specifically fairy circles? Because that's really sort of the, like, connective logic here with Beltane 103.
Yeah. So we kind of do, in a way, like sort of mock fairy circles. We typically invite people over for Beltane because it's like the season of my birthday and we always throw a party.
Yeah, we always do like a blot and 7 or whatever.
So we usually have people around the bonfire, and Beltane parties get a little wild. So sometimes there is dancing around the bonfire and festivities around the bonfire. So there's that. Of course, we've said before, our house happens to be inside of a redwood tree fairy circle.
Yeah. And we have several like both full circle and like partial circle fairy circles on the property in both like redwood and some of the other like plant life that's round.
Yeah.
Right?
We do also have a fairly peculiar circular clearing on one spot of our property. And this is where we usually do like pinatas and stuff, like, and we often do pinatas for my birthday
and stuff like that, because it's like burned in, it's like burned on all sides.
Yeah, so we use it that way. And when I want to go and speak to the Fae specifically, that is the space that I go to. And whenever I do that, I always go with like an offering to give them. And I definitely notice that is more like bang for your buck, shall we say, than just leaving them an offering on my altar in the like little dedicated fairy like Fae space on my altar. So it is something that's definitely incorporated there. There are definitely great ways to incorporate the Fae into Beltane specifically, especially because Beltane is the time of the thinning of the veil. So anything that you do with the Fae at this point in time is gonna be particularly potent. And when you're looking at that, you can kind of do like, any of these Beltane things. So Beltane is big for like fertility and abundance, but not necessarily like making babies fertility. It's like the time that like the earth is waking up and you're planting things and your seeds are working and stuff like that. So, it's a time of abundance. It's a time of fertility. It's a time of renewal. It's also a time to like appreciate the beauty in the world around you as the world is coming to life. And when you think about it as Samhain as sort of the opposite side of that coin, where it's appreciating the beauty of the world around you as its life cycle has kind of come to an end, and we're coming to the end of the season, the end of the growing season. So you can sort of take any of those pieces into play there.
Yeah, totally,
and incorporate those
totally.
into your Beltane practice or into your practice with the Fae, but also you don't necessarily have to use those for the Fae.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I get that. We like you know, like you were saying with the large circle that we have down the hill a little bit, that we do like piñatas and stuff in, so we like to generally incorporate that in like our especially like spring and summer and fall festivals.
Yeah.
Down there, I don't really do anything like super directly with the Fae. Again, to me, it's like bees is really the best. I mean, bees, mantises, ladybugs, like anything that's just sort of like it, like they're there and they're doing some stuff, and like I'm gonna help them out as best I can. So
yeah,
like whatever's clever, they're already doing a thing, so I don't need to be like here, ladybug, fuck these guys, you know. I'm like, hey, don't go into that water, bro. The number of times I have had to like rescue ladybugs from water. I have a bunch of ponds for fish, so they really love falling into water.
I also tend to work with the Fae more than you do. That's just sort of like one of the differences in our personal practices.
Totally, yeah.
Is I work with them like a lot, but that's not really something that you necessarily do. It's just sort of there by osmosis.
Yeah,
for you.
They're just there doing whatever, and I'm just here doing whatever, and so it's kind of like, be cool, bro.
Yeah,
you know, don't be an asshole to your neighbor is sort of like the way that I kind of approach the whole thing, you know? And then like for us, Beltane is obviously like end of spring, we're getting into it. Our garden is like very judgy with the amount of work I have to do right now.
Yeah.
So, like that's my main focus around Beltane. And like before Beltane is like making sure that everything's like in the ground, and you know the planters are full, and the raised beds are full, and the fabric pots are full, and everything's on some sort of a system, and I know where everything is so I can remember to water it. And like, you know, we've like yanked weeds, and we've done all the weed whacking to like kill back the like, you know, invasive guys. We've got ivy out here, so like,
oh my gosh,
you know,
so much ivy.
Kill back the ivy so that way it dries up in the summertime, so that way there's just less of it, which we've made, you know, huge successes at like killing the ivy back and letting the natural plants, the wood sorrel and the ferns and such like that, to take back over. We have like a weird like crop of forget-me-nots out of bloody nowhere, out of just left field, forget-me-notting about. So we're doing that. And like we're having like broom take off. And so like, you know, we're just like doing that kind of stuff. Trying to get the land a little bit back to like, it's like not invaded and ivied up state.
Yeah. Which is also kind of its own way to partner with the Fae, because they are sort of stationary in that this is their home, and this was their home before we were here, both like us and like we
and like humans,
were in this area. So like, you know, they sort of take that to heart. They're like, oh well, this like human really cares about this area. So I noticed that they're always more active when we're doing stuff outside. We always tend to find little gifts when we're doing things, like when we do a bunch of yard work.
I think of it as like gardeners' friends, you know, like
oh, that's such a great way to look at it.
Spiders are gardeners' friends, you know, and I know I'm using insects as an example, but like this is one of them. Honestly, for me, like birds, right, like finches and stuff like that, they don't really like fuck with the garden, but. So like I look at the Fae as sort of like the like gardener's helpers, the way that you look at like spiders and bees and like finches, you know, anything that eats like slugs, snails, caterpillars, right? So I'm always like a big like proponent of like bird seed and such like that.
Yeah.
So like that's sort of the way that I look at the Fae, is that like my relationship with the Fae is purely through me being like an avid gardener, because I love growing my own vegetables and such.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not growing so much that I like don't have to go shopping at the grocery store or something, you know. Like, I'm not that good. But yeah, those people are committed in a way better way than I am.
Yeah.
But like, no, I look at it as being sort of like part of the natural relationship that humans should have with the land around them and their food. So that's kind of that's my approach to all of that, you know?
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
So next time we have a pub chat. So
Woo!
Stay tuned for those. I'm the one that gets to come up with the questions for those, and they are always very rando. Maybe this time we'll keep that pub chat down to a reasonable amount of time, I said, whilst lying through my teeth, because...
We literally talked about this in the last episode.
I don't know that it's even possible,
that's
bro.
Just not
Yeah, I don't even know that it's possible.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll ask, like, a really simple question this time. Maybe I'm capable of doing that for once.
Definitely not.
We'll see what happens.
Definitely not.
So yeah, we've got a pub chat, and then back to the full length guys. So we'll see what's going on with that. And also we'd like to take this opportunity to thank our patrons, which is Alan, Miranda, Helena, Alexa, and Somewhere. You guys are awesome, and you guys keep us doing awesome stuff like this, which is awesome.
Yep. But thank you for helping us do what we do better every time.
Yep, definitely. And if you want to support us, we have a Patreon. All the links will be where links traditionally are, based on the manner in which you're listening to us. And that's also where you'll find our Book of Shadows pages, which are the graphically designed pages that I make for each one of these podcast episodes.
Yep.
Which are a ton of fun, and we're nearly caught up, guys. So
yeah,
we got a lot done. We're only back a few at this point. So and those should be done relatively shortly now that we're back caught up in a bunch of stuff. So, thank you to our patrons.
Yeah. And normally for these 103 Sabbath episodes, we've been doing suggested reading, but this was actually really difficult. There's not a whole lot out there that's long enough or easily obtainable enough for me to give
like
y'all as suggested reading. So, go and Google fairy circle art and just kind of take it in.
Yeah, definitely. And are we gonna list our sources?
No, there's a lot.
Oh, there's a lot of sources. I mean, we can put them all in a list.
We could put the sources in a list. No.
Yeah. So.
No.
But yeah, just look out there in general.
HTTPS.
I mean, we're not going to say it out loud. We're not going to say it out loud. That's not, no. It's in a list. It's in a list, not a word list. We don't do word lists.
We definitely do.
Yeah, she does. I don't participate in that. So definitely just if there's something that you have found that you kind of look at as a prime source in fairy circle stuff, let us know. Comment below in the YouTube video. And speaking of the YouTube video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, and do all that kind of stuff. And if you're listening to this on a podcast network, leave us a review, so that way we can know that you listen. Really, at this point in time.
Also, let us know if do you work with the Fae? Are you, what are your thoughts on working with the Fae?
What do you do with fairy circles? How do you feel about circles?
How do you feel? I have a bunch of videos on my Instagram and TikTok about working with the Fae, so you can go check those out if you want a little bit of extra.
Yeah, definitely. But either way, I've been John Norgrove. This has been Julie Norgrove. This has been the Horn
and Cauldron
podcast. And we will catch you guys next time. Stay magical, folks.
Yeah, and don't forget, breathe in self-confidence and breathe out self-doubt.